Do you know what processed foods are? Well, we're going to talk about 10 things that make up a processed food. Now, these aren't going to be in every single processed food, but when we talk about them, you might start recognizing foods that include 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, and they would go down as processed foods. So when we're talking about healthy eating, what we're talking about is reducing as much of the processed food as we can and going for what would be described as a proper food, I guess, with the nutrients that the body requires to be able to function each day. Number 1 is too little fibre. Now, fibre is essentially the structure of a plant. So it's what gives the plant its shape. It's what gives the plant the thickness, the width, the height of whatever. And you've got two types of fibre. You've got that type of fibre which is which is creating that structure, and then you've got a fibre on the inside which is essentially housing all the different nutrients within it. Now, the fibre itself, which in some respects is the bit that we're talking about now, as you can see here, is it creates a barrier along the intestinal wall to slow absorption. So when we talk about feeling fuller for longer, part of that reason is because of the fibre reducing the speed at which the nutrients pass into the body. And a part of that, so I mentioned you've got the structure on the outside, but you've also got the structure on the inside, which is where all the nutrients are held. Well, as we go through our chewing process, we're basically breaking down that structure of fibre and allowing the nutrients to release. But then as it goes down into the stomach and into the intestines, that breakdown will continue. And then you've then got the nutrients which are then moving into the body. But what it's doing because of the fibre is it's slowing that process, which is helping you feel fuller for longer and using the nutrients much more effectively. The second thing with fibre, as you can see there, it feeds the microbiome. Now, these are known as prebiotics. So we know about all the good bacteria and so on and so forth in the gut. Now, probiotics, you are putting those good bacteria into the gut. With prebiotics, as long as the good bacteria is there, those prebiotics, which is partly due to the fibre, they are feeding it. So it keeps that good bacteria alive. So it's vitally important that we eat plenty of fibre in the diet, because what we're doing is we're keeping not only the gut healthy, but we're allowing the nutrients to pass into the body so they can be used much more effectively. 2, we've got too many omega-3s, too few omega-3s and too many omega-6s. Now, again, there's nothing really wrong with the omega-6s. It's more to do with the balance between them. So you can see there you've got the omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory, which are reducing the inflammation process. And then we've got 6s, which are pro-inflammatory. And as it states there, we should have a ratio of 3:1 of omega-3s to 1 omega-6. But currently it's around the wrong way and vastly out of proportion, which is 1:25. So what we need to be able to do is get more of the omega-3 foods into our body to aid that anti-inflammatory aspect of it. And with other processed foods, not only the omega-6s, but there are many other ingredients, many additives that have been put into foods that are pro-inflammatory anyway. And if we're not eating enough omega-3s anyway, then that inflammation process is only going to be enhanced. So again, the idea is reducing down not only the omega-6s but processed foods in general, and improving the vitamins, the minerals, the omega-6s, which are the anti-inflammatory type of foods. Number 3 is too few micronutrients. Now, macronutrients are our carbs, fats and proteins. They get most of the focus. A little bit less focus is put on the micronutrients. But these micronutrients, as you can see on the screen, things like vitamins, so A, E, K, B and C. Obviously D we can get from food, but depending on which diet you choose, which is why I sort of didn't really include it, depending on which diet you choose, it will come from sunlight. But it can be fortified in certain foods. But again, I would recommend getting it from sunlight as and where as best you can. But again, these micronutrients are essentially that they are more fundamental than micronutrients, than macronutrients, because they help the macronutrients do their job essentially. So if we haven't got the micronutrients, the macronutrients can't do their job. Things it does, they'll regulate blood pH, they'll regulate protein synthesis, they'll regulate energy levels. So basically, all of the fundamentals of the human body for it just to function day to day come from the micronutrients. And if we aren't getting them from our foods, the body's going to get it from its reserves and internal reserve spaces. So what we need to be able to do is get it from the diet so we can not only keep the body functioning, but keep the body healthy with all the reserves that it requires. 4 is too many trans fats. Now, trans fats are being reduced because not only have they got a bad name, but agencies and or government agencies are starting to have enough public pressure to be able to reduce them. But how we would identify them is simply by the packaging that they're in. They're generally in foods that are boxed, packaged, or in fast foods. So all the convenience type of foods will generally have some degree of trans fats. But essentially what type of fat that is, it's a processed fat. Fats are very good for the body. Saturated, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats are very good for the body. It's when it starts to get processed into trans fats that it then becomes a problem. And these are the types of foods. So the convenience foods we want to start avoiding. There is nothing wrong with sort of locally sourced organic butters and things like that. Although people, they've got a bad name because they're high fat. Again, the high fat isn't necessarily the problem. It would depend on the diet that goes around it that will sort of distinguish whether that's going to be a better food or a worse food for you. The better the overall diet, the more saturated fats are actually going to do a very good job for your body. So it's very important that we eat the right fats and in the right amounts. Number 5 is too many branch chain amino acids. Now, certainly in the fitness industry, these branch chain amino acids get a lot of kudos, let's say. They are needed, as you can see on the screen, but too many and too often and in the wrong ratios, then it becomes a problem. One reason being, as you can see here, they'll be converted to liver fat and can increase insulin resistance. So again, we need to sort of steer away from these types of foods. They are sort of essential amino acids, so they are required by the body. But again, as I mentioned, we do just need to get them in the right amount so we're not putting too much of the wrong foods into our body. And if we talk about processed foods as a general rule, there's too many of them in people's diets anyway. So if we can start reducing them from everywhere, then that's only going to be beneficial. Number 6, too many emulsifiers. Now, I could add in more additives. There are some additives that have been used throughout time, salt being one of them, which we're going to come on to later. Again, that's an essential thing, but too many additives are just unnecessary. It's there to keep water and fat separated. They are detergents and they may strip away the mucin layer that protects the intestinal epithelial cells. So again, it's stripping away what is essentially the mucus layer, which is the protective layer of the body, which is going to be putting your body at more harm. So by adding in too many of these emulsifiers, it might be in foods like ice creams and essentially any. If you can look on the back, they'll be in any type of processed boxed packaged food. I would imagine you'll be able to see them in a future tutorial. I will talk about a whole list of them, and it's just another E number. It's another additive that gets put in there, but ice cream is an easy one to understand. So essentially, it's keeping fat and water from separating, so it keeps the consistency of the food the way they want it, so it looks right, so people will eat it. Number 7 is too many nitrates. So nitrates from processed meats. Now again, we need to be specific on the processed meats. So things like chorizos, cured hams, things like that that go through some sort of process. What you would then talk about are the again sort of the faster type of foods, which again those or certain foods of those will have gone through a process, and they can be metabolized into nitrosoureas, which are linked to colon cancer. Now, those types of foods, that's just one aspect of them. There, you could go down many different routes with regards to certain less necessary foodstuffs in them, endotoxins, mycotoxins, all those different types of things that are in there that aren't useful to the body. So it's those types of foods that we want to be reducing. If you've watched any previous videos of mine, you would hopefully have seen that, again, it's not about removing meat from diet. It's about largely basing it on plant foods or food plants, or however it needs to be described. So it's just getting the balance right, because I know some people will be disagreeing with some of the things I'm saying. That's absolutely fine. The main sort of principles are we need to be eating proper foods rather than processed foods, as I'm describing. And just as I'm going through these 10 things that make up these foods, there are more. So we could take the conversation further on, but I think for now 10 is absolutely fine. Number 8, excessive salt. So I've mentioned excessive salt before with regards to the processed meats, and it is an additive that has been used throughout time. So it's not just in this modern age that that it's come about that we've been using salt as a preservative, but with regards to the rest of the diet that goes around it, because salt is an essential part. So the sodium is an essential part, the chloride is an essential part of our body and the way that it works. So we need to be able to get these foods in the right balance. But excessive amounts in people with high blood pressure can increase risk of heart attacks, strokes, and heart failure. So it's not a useful thing to have in excessive amounts. What we do want to be doing is getting it in the right amount. And also we can look at the quality of it as well, because the very cheaper type of salt will come with some sort of anti-caking agent, which is another additive, which will affect how the salt works within the body. We can look at it as it goes, as we drop it into water, for example. If it dissolves, then we've got a better quality of salt than if it stays in the little fine rocks that we drop in there. So there are all these different things we can start to understand about what is good salt, what is bad salt. But as I've mentioned, they've put it in all these different packaged foods. They've put it onto meat, so on and so forth. So we're just getting it from everywhere. And then if we're adding more salt on top of that, it's only going to enhance the problem, be it good salt or a bad salt. We need to get the right salt in at the right amount. And then finally, number 10 is too much fructose. Now, when we talk about fructose, it's the fructose that comes from corn syrup. Now, this is highly processed because they've had to remove it from the corn, and it's linked to type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, cancer, and obesity. And if we've got obesity, we are at higher risk than sort of everything else becomes heightened. And also, it doesn't really offer us any nutritional value. There's no vitamins, there's no minerals within there that the body wants to use. It will just go into the bloodstream, spike hormone response, and then in some respects, when we crash at the other side of it, that will encourage another hormone type of spike. And then the hormones are kind of out of whack, and the body's trying to catch up with itself to get it back into its equilibrium. So it's kind of sending us out of whack until our body can get back in. But again, with the amount of sugar that people are eating and the amount of sugar in certain foods, we're kind of working against that equilibrium that our body's trying to maintain all the time. So the body's always playing catch up. So we want to try and avoid as many of these high fructose type of foods, which are things just like soft drinks, sweets, chocolates, biscuits, so on and so forth. The list goes on. It could be much more. So it's very much understanding that and being able to, let's just say, make wiser food choices. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it's given you a better idea of what makes up unprocessed foods. And as I mentioned at the start, not every processed food is going to include all of these, but they will include many. Number 9 is too much alcohol. Now, alcohol is converted to liver fat and drives insulin resistance, which is then associated with, as you can see on the screen, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, and low HDL cholesterol. It's a toxin to the body. The body's trying to remove it as quickly as it can, but the more we put in, the more problems it's going to cause within the body. So again, it's something that we need to minimize. It's something that we need to start getting control of to be able to have that healthier body and that healthier lifestyle.